Hello, and welcome back to the cookie jar for another adventure. Today, we are doing the 8th recipe from the Candy Cane Murder. They are called chocolate candy cane cookies. They are quite a few pages, but I feel like a lot of it's notes. So to start off, we are preheating our oven to 350. You're going to need 4 squares unsweetened baking chocolate, that's 4 ounces, 1 1/4 cups, 2 1/2 sticks chilled butter, 2 cups white granulated sugar, 2 beaten eggs, just whip them up in a glass with a fork, 2 teaspoons of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, 1/3 of a cup of corn syrup, 2 tablespoons of water, 1 tablespoon, that's 3 teaspoons of vanilla, 4 cups of flour, pack it down in the cup when you measure it. And then for a topping, you're going to want 1/4 cup of sugar and 1/4 cup finely crushed mint candy canes, about 12 mini candy canes. Some of the notes are when they melt the butter and the chocolate together that they do it in the microwave in a Pyrex 1-quart measuring cup. And then it says Hannah's first note, if you like a strong peppermint flavor, use 2 teaspoons of vanilla and 1 teaspoon of peppermint extract instead of the tablespoon of vanilla extract that's called for in the recipe. I thought about that, but I also when I watch those baking shows on TV and people use peppermint a lot. They always say it tastes like toothpaste, and I was really trying to avoid that. The second note is whenever I measure something sticky like corn syrup, maple syrup, or honey, I spray my measuring cup with Pam or another non-stick cooking spray first. Then the sticky stuff slides right out and it's easy to wash. I find that sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I think it's because I measure stuff out and then it sits for a couple of minutes. I don't use it right away. That might be it. I don't know. It does give you 2 different ways to melt butter. You can do it in the microwave or you can do it in a pan. So, whatever your preference, I guess. The next note is, again, you put in half the flour. It says that's 2 cups. You mix it in, then add the remaining flour. That's 2 cups and mix thoroughly. It's a little better written than last time where it was kind of It does say, well, the oven is preheating to crush a candy cane. Well, you're supposed to have them crushed. It does have a really long third note for this. It says, I unwrap my candy canes, stick them in a heavy plastic bag, and hit them with a little rubber mallet I got from Dad's hardware store before we sold it. Lisa says she does hers almost the same way, except she puts a board over the bag and bangs on the board with a hammer. Anyway, you want to crush them is fine. Just be really careful with hammers and mallets if you have ceramic tile counters. You can also break them in pieces with your hands and then pulverize them in a food processor with a steel blade. Read your instruction manual to make sure the food processor you have can handle this task. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but last summer when Andrea, Michelle, and I were staying out at Mother's Lake Cottage, we couldn't find a hammer, so I put the candy canes in a triple layer of plastic bags, and Michelle backed over them several times with a car. It worked. You're going to mix the candy canes with the sugar. And it says the goal is to get an equal amount of sugar and crushed candy canes on each of the dough balls that you'll make. And then you're going to bake them at 350 for 8 to 10 minutes, leave them for a minute, and then remove them to a wire rack. If you leave them on the cookie sheet for more than a minute, they may stick. It's not the sugar, it's the crushed candy canes. They melt and then stick to your baking sheets. Yield approximately 8 dozen yummy cookies. So, I have everything ready. Let's get started. This is all the things we'll be needing today. First thing we're doing is melting the butter and the unsweetened chocolate. It says to put them in the microwave for 3 minutes on high and then let them cool. That seems like a really, really long time to be in the microwave. What is the point of that if it doesn't actually open the thing? Whipping it we go. And no, there is no Willy Wonka golden ticket in this. Sorry. Next, we're adding in the butter. And if anybody is watching this knows what the science is behind the butter being chilled for this, I would love to know. I'm just curious if that actually matters. Or if it doesn't need to be room temperature or something. Maybe it being cold, it'll melt slower than the chocolate, but they melt together at the same time. It does say to mix these together, so I'm thinking I should have done a stick of butter and then the chocolate. Oh dear. Alright, you know what? I'm I'm gonna put it in the microwave for a minute and a half, and then I'm gonna stir it, and then because this is not mixing. All right. So it's had a minute and a half. And there are some substantial sized chunks, which I'm not entirely worried about, but it does. I don't know if I'm going to give it another minute and a half. I don't feel like it needs it, but probably at least another minute. It's definitely way melted, but it's gritty and grainy. All right, so it says to let that sit for, I think, 3 minutes. We're going to move on. We need to combine the white sugar and our eggs. Oh, that looks uniform pale yellow to me. So, baking soda and the salt go next, and someone once told me to mix it in while it's spinning. And the salt. Next is the corn syrup. With the corn syrup, you're adding in the water and the vanilla. All right, so in the next step, you're adding in this, but you need to be able to hold it comfortably before you add it in. And this is definitely not comfortably being held. And it's icicles in here, so this should feel amazing, and it doesn't. It's just way too hot. So I guess we're gonna give this a couple more minutes. And no matter how tempting this looks, it is unsweetened baking chocolate. Do not lick it or try it, because it will be disgusting. I'm sure most of us learned that in childhood, but if you didn't, don't. It's not as tempting as it looks. I'm gonna give this another like 3 minutes, and then we'll see if we can work with it. Okay, so we have gotten this finally cool enough to hold it comfortably. Honestly, it feels really good with how cold it is these days. So it doesn't say how to mix it in. It just says to mix it in. I'm going to drizzle it a little bit slowly. Next, we're adding half the flour. And now the rest. It says to give it a final stir by hand, so I'm just going to try to get all this flour from up the top mixed in. One of the things that I noticed is that it wants you to preheat your oven now, and then while it's preheating, to keep this covered sitting on the counter. So my oven takes about 10 minutes to preheat, so I think I'm just going to let this sit covered on the counter for about 10 minutes. And then I'll work with it. It also mentions to crush your candy canes and mix up your sugar, which I've got the candy canes crushed, and it's only going to take a second to mix the sugars together. Fighting with plastic wrap was not on my to-do list today, but here we are. Here we go. You sit there. We have our crushed candy canes and our sugar. Neither one of them want to cooperate. My candy canes seem to have stuck together. We might have to mix more. What in the hey-hays? I can't say I've ever had this happen before. Okay. Now it's all in the same bowl together. Just gonna take a fork, make sure I break up any clumps of candy cane I find. And that looks so pretty. Can't wait to mix it. I only hope that it said it should take about 12 candy canes to make the quarter. And this isn't like with most recipes where if it's off, you can just dump in more sugar and keep rolling. With this, you have to crush up more candy canes and the sugar. So I'm hoping that this will be enough to coat all of our cookies, which if I didn't say before, it says it'll yield 8 dozen. but that's normally a little bit off. But sometimes it's over, and I guess we'll see. Okay. Got about another 5 minutes before this will be ready. We're going to take our cookie dough, plop it in our candy canes, roll that around. Get it a nice coating. And there we go. Now we're just gonna keep doing that until all of our trays are full. It is a very light, soft dough. It makes the comment that if it's too hard to work with, you can always stick it in your fridge, obviously. And when you're not making the dough balls, to put it back in the fridge. So basically, scoop and bake and let it harden between batches. But with scooping them and not rolling them by hand, I don't have to worry about that as much. Now lastly, it says to flatten them a little bit. So there we are. Our chocolate peppermint candy cane cookies. I'm just going to roll out the rest and we'll see how many we get. So I am finally done rolling and coating the cookies. I had just enough sugar and candy canes. There are 82 cookies here, which is about 2 shy of 7 dozen. They'll bake for about 8 to 10 minutes, cool for 1 minute on the trays, and then go to wire racks. So the cookies are out of the oven. They did take a while to bake, but they are finally all done. So I think a lot of them are supposed to look more like this, but I feel like most just kind of look plain. They have a little bit of, if you look really close, but I do like this. So I think this is more of the larger chunks of peppermint, so maybe don't pulverize them so that you get equal amount like the book said, but they're definitely a harder, crunchier cookie. They have a good chocolate flavor and have a nice mellow peppermint. I do not recommend adding the peppermint extract to this, but so here's one without as much as the peppermint on top. Yeah, so you still get, even if you can't see the peppermint like you can on this one, you still get peppermint flavor. But I definitely don't think the peppermint extract would be necessary unless you just don't have any peppermints to put on top. The only way I think that would be necessary. They are a good cookie. They were quick to throw together. Of course, you know, your baking and your rolling time factor in. So they weren't as quick as they could be, but overall, I think they're a good batch of cookies for what you get. You get almost, I think it was 8 batches, 8 dozen, I think it was, 82. So next week we are doing a devil's food cookies. So those should be interesting. I'm hoping that they're not made with a box cake mix, because like we tried one of those weeks ago and they're a little off, but I guess we'll find out if you join us next week. I hope you all have a good one. Bye.